Imagine your boss calling you into their office, sliding a piece of paper across the desk, and offering you a $10,000 pay cut.
Right, which sounds, like a nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. But imagine you actually look them in the eye and say, thank you.
I mean, that sounds absolutely unhinged.
It totally does. But according to some recent talent data, nearly half the workforce is actively willing to do exactly that, provide they get one specific thing in return.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so, okay, let's unpack this because, we are looking at a workplace dynamic right now that is completely upending everything we thought we knew about why people stay at a job and why they leave.
It really is. Yeah, it's a structural shift and is catching a lot of legacy companies entirely off guard right now.
Oh, for sure.
Because it used to be that if you wanted someone to stick around, you simply wrote a bigger check, right? Like think of compensation as the fuel in a car.
Okay, I like that.
As long as the tank was full, the assumption was that the employee would just, keep driving. But what this new data reveals is that all the fuel in the world doesn't matter if the employee feels like they don't have their hands on the steering wheel.
Right.
They will still crash right out of your organization.
I love that framing the steering wheel analogy. And finding out who controls that steering wheel is really our mission for today's deep dive.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're jumping into this incredibly thought-provoking article by Brand Nook. And they're a private office and co-working space provider based out in Indianapolis.
Right.
The piece is called The Coworking Catalyst, Strategic Workspace for Employee Retention. And we're going to use this source material to uncover why, where we work is rapidly becoming just as critical as what we do.
It's so true.
It's a look at how businesses are using physical workspace, not just as a place to stick a laptop, but as a primary strategic tool to stop their absolute best talent from walking out the door.
Which requires moving workspace from, a passive line item on a facilities budget to an active driving component of your HR strategy.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start by dismantling those old assumptions. Historically, if you were sitting in a corporate boardroom talking about why turnover was spiking, the conversation was heavily siloed into 3 specific buckets.
Right, the usual suspects.
Yeah. Compensation, career development, and management quality. Did the employee get their annual raise? Is there a path to promotion? And, is their direct manager just a total nightmare to work for?
Those are the classic metrics. And, to be clear, if your management team is toxic or your pay is wildly below market, you're going to lose people regardless of where they sit.
Oh, absolutely.
But those metrics are no longer the whole story. So the Brand Nook article pulls in this extensive research compiled by SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Management.
Right, which is huge in the HR world.
Yeah, for context, SHRM data is effectively the gold standard for HR professionals.
Right.
Because it's based on massive aggregates of real exit interviews, not just, hypothetical surveys.
And what SHRM found really tracks those traditional buckets, right? So limited career growth, poor management, better compensation elsewhere. But sitting right alongside them as a top driver for voluntary departure is work-life balance.
Yeah, that's the big one.
And here's where we really need to connect the dots for you listening, because out of all those reasons, work-life balance is the one most inextricably linked to a company's workspace policy.
Well, and we need to define what work-life balance actually means in the modern context, because it has fundamentally evolved.
How so?
For a long time, employers viewed it as a perk. Right, like a scheduling convenience. It meant you could leave at 3 p.m. on a Friday to catch your kid's soccer game.
Right, totally.
But the data shows it's no longer just about the raw number of hours you work. It's about the daily cognitive friction involved in working those hours.
Cognitive friction, yeah.
Yeah. Employees who lack autonomy over their physical environment experience chronic stress, their baseline engagement drops, and fundamentally they just feel infantilized by their employer.
Infantilized. Wow, yeah. And if you want proof of how powerful that psychological effect is, let's look at the iHire 2024 Talent Retention Report that was highlighted in the source. Because this is the statistic that completely blew my mind.
Oh, yeah, the pay cut stat.
Yes. 40.8% of workers would actually accept a lower paying job if it offered more flexibility.
It's wild.
I mean, more than 4 out of 10 professionals are raising their hands and saying, please pay me less, just let me control my environment.
Right.
Furthermore, 20.8% of employees who actually quit in 2024 cited poor work-life balance as their primary reason for leaving. That's 1 in 5 departures.
Which is huge because when nearly half of your workforce is operating as a rational economic actor and choosing to actively trade salary for autonomy, I mean, it completely changes the calculus for talent acquisition.
Yeah, it really does.
Polaris Market Research, which is also cited in the piece, indicates that thoughtfully structured flexibility is now functioning as a core retention driver. It's part of the job itself, not just some add-on benefit.
So let me bounce this off you because I'm trying to contextualize this shift. Is flexibility basically the new 401k match?
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it.
Right. It feels like we are in this incredible reverse bidding war where companies are suddenly competing on lifestyle infrastructure rather than just writing bigger checks. Company A offers a massive salary but chains you to a cubicle. Company B offers slightly less but says, work where you work best.
Right.
And Company B seems to be winning the war for top-tier talent.
I actually think it's deeper than a 401k match, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, because a 401k match is a financial perk that pays off in 30 years, right? Workplace autonomy pays off tomorrow morning.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great point.
It's less of a benefit and more of a baseline operating system for the modern professional. If you don't offer it, you aren't just missing a perk. You are structurally disadvantaged in the talent market. You're basically trying to run modern software on a legacy operating system.
I love that. But the reality of running that modern software is incredibly messy, isn't it?
Oh, totally.
Because if giving people total control over their environment is the ultimate prize, why isn't everyone who is working from their living room couch perfectly happy? We have to address the hybrid paradox here.
Yes, we do.
Because solving the rigid office problem seems to have accidentally engineered a massive mental health issue.
Right. Well, what's fascinating here is that the initial data on remote work was overwhelmingly positive from a retention standpoint, which sort of masked the long-term effects.
Oh, okay.
The source cites a 2026 Workplace Statistics and Benchmarks report showing that 69% of employers saw improved retention immediately after adopting hybrid policies.
I mean, 69% is a massive jump. So on paper, it looks like a total victory.
On paper, yes. But the practical reality of executing that flexibility is fraught with hidden psychological traps.
Like what?
Well, the primary danger of unfiltered remote work is severe isolation. When professionals work from home indefinitely, the incidental social friction just disappears. The casual collisions of ideas vanish.
Right, you're just alone with your screen.
Exactly. There is a measurably weaker sense of belonging, and it becomes incredibly difficult to maintain consistent motivation. From a purely business perspective, isolation leads directly to disengagement. And disengagement is the waiting room for turnover.
Wow. The waiting room for turnover. That's a chilling way to put it, but I mean, it's incredibly accurate.
Yeah.
And if you are listening to this right now while sitting at your kitchen table, staring at a pile of unsorted mail next to your laptop, you know exactly what this feels like.
Well, absolutely.
It's not just social isolation, it's structural isolation. The article talks about how flexibility without structure completely destroys routines. You get this toxic blur between professional and personal time.
Right. We call that concept boundary theory in organizational psychology. And it's critical to understand the mechanism of context switching here.
Okay, break that down for us.
When your home is your office, your brain never receives the environmental cues required to downshift.
Exactly. You're sitting there trying to write a complex strategy document, but the fridge is humming, you know the dishwasher needs to be emptied, and you can literally see the dog's leash.
Yep.
Your brain starts associating dinner time with impending deadlines. You never really leave work because you never really went to work. The friction of the commute was just replaced by the friction of constant context switching.
And that context switching completely erodes what we call your professional identity.
Professional identity.
Yeah, it's the psychological sense that your physical environment reflects the importance of your work. Home offices or informal settings like a loud coffee shop rarely provide this consistently.
That makes total sense.
Without a clear environmental boundary that signals to your brain, what I am doing right now matters, burnout is inevitable. You are draining your cognitive reserves just trying to stay in a professional headspace.
So let's map out the tension here. If a company forces everyone back to a rigid downtown office, they get mass resignations because people refuse to give up their autonomy.
Right.
But if they give an employee total freedom to avoid the office, That total freedom leads to isolating burnout and blurred boundaries, which also leads to resignations.
Exactly.
So organizations are basically backed into a corner. They have to find a third option that solves for both autonomy and connection.
They do. They can't just choose between the turnover risk of rigid micromanagement and the turnover risk of isolated burnout. And this is where co-working emerges in the source material as a highly strategic intervention.
Yeah, and here's where it gets really interesting, because the Brannock piece frames co-working as this perfect middle ground, like the Goldilocks solution between the harsh office and the lonely kitchen table.
Well, I'd actually argue it's not a Goldilocks solution at all.
Really? Why not?
Because Goldilocks implies a compromise. Like you're settling for something in the middle. Strategic co-working isn't a compromise. It's an entirely new paradigm.
Yeah.
It reintroduces social and professional interaction without requiring a mandated return to a central headquarters.
And the statistics backing up this new paradigm are absolutely staggering. According to the research cited in the article, 89% of co-working members report higher happiness, along with measurable improvements in focus, productivity, and confidence.
Which is incredible.
Right. I mean, you can hardly get 89% of people to agree on what day of the week it is, let alone report higher cognitive performance.
Right. It speaks to how deeply professionals crave that environmental boundary we discussed earlier. Look at the operational metrics. 68% of members feel more focused, and 64% improve their ability to meet deadlines when working from a dedicated co-working environment.
That's a huge jump.
Because these are purpose-built spaces. They are engineered to trigger cognitive focus the moment you walk through the door.
Okay, so that brings up a wild concept. If we look at those numbers, are companies basically just renting a psychological boundary?
How do you mean?
Like, when a business pays for an employee's access to a space like Brannock, they aren't actually paying for the physical desk or the ergonomic chair or the fast Wi-Fi. They're paying for the physical separation of the employee's work self and their home self.
That is precisely the mechanism at play. You are financing focus and you are subsidizing your employees' mental health.
Wow.
The core operating principle that makes this work is optionality. The article places heavy emphasis on this term. Optionality is the ability to intentionally choose your work environment based on your specific daily tasks.
Okay, give me a practical example of how optionality plays out in a normal work week.
Sure. Say on Tuesday you have a massive data analysis project. You need deep, isolated focus, so you choose to work from your quiet home office.
Makes sense.
But on Wednesday, you need collaborative energy. Or you have a high-stakes client pitch that requires a highly professional backdrop. So you book a private room or utilize the shared space at a boutique location like Brannock. You adjust the environmental setting without sacrificing productivity or autonomy.
Okay, wait. I need to push back on this a little bit, specifically regarding the financial reality of this model.
I'll go for it.
Because it's clear why this is fantastic for the employee's mental health. But we have to talk dollars and cents. If I'm running a scrappy startup and I am bleeding capital trying to get a product to market, why on earth would I spend hundreds or thousands of dollars a month paying for my engineers to sit in a boutique space when those engineers have perfectly good Wi-Fi at home?
Right.
Isn't this just a luxury expense?
Well, if you connect this to the bigger picture and view it purely as real estate, it looks like an expense. But if you connect it to operational velocity, it's a critical investment. Startups operate with extreme resource constraints. For them, retention isn't just a nice cultural initiative, it is literally a matter of survival.
Because the cost of replacing an early employee isn't just an HR fee, it's lost institutional knowledge.
The recruitment drag is massive. The cost of hiring, onboarding, and the sheer loss of momentum during a transition can cripple a small organization.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But here is the structural disadvantage. Early-stage companies rarely have a centralized office. If you are trying to hire a top-tier software engineer away from a massive tech firm, and your pitch is, hey, you can work from your couch.
Right.
While the competitor offers a polished, engaging environment, you lose that talent.
So access to a co-working space allows the startup to punch above its weight class in the talent market.
Exactly. It closes the gap without taking on the devastating financial burden of a 5-year commercial lease.
Right, because nobody wants a 5-year lease right now.
Nobody. Offering a membership to a space like Brannock sends a powerful stability signal to prospective hires. It says, we are professional and we invest in our people. The startup maintains its financial agility, but still offers a comprehensive work experience.
Okay, so let's talk about the specific ROI on that engagement, because the source pulls in Gallup research that completely reframes this.
Gallup data is always so telling.
It really is. Gallup indicates that highly engaged teams experience 51% lower turnover and 23% higher profitability compared to disengaged teams. I want to repeat that for the listener. 51% lower turnover.
It's massive.
When I look at that number, it completely changes how I view the cost of employees leaving.
Yeah, so.
Turnover isn't just a natural cost of doing business, it's a preventable tax.
Oh, I like that term, preventable tax.
Yeah. Companies that force strict office mandates or leave their remote workers totally isolated are blindly paying this massive disengagement tax in the form of constant recruiting fees and crushed EBITDA, whereas paying for co-working access is a relatively cheap, targeted intervention to just eliminate that tax entirely.
Which is exactly why we are seeing a massive shift in corporate real estate strategy, even at the enterprise level. The corporate teams and Fortune 500s are completely changing how they evaluate physical space.
Yeah.
It is no longer being assessed solely on the raw cost per square foot.
Right. The article mentions they're actively shifting to distributed satellite offices and hybrid hubs.
Right, because their workforces are increasingly distributed geographically. Large companies recognize they can no longer force a 2-hour commute to a monolithic central headquarters.
People just won't do it anymore.
They won't. But they also know that leaving employees in permanent isolation breeds that exact disengagement tax you just described. So they use co-working spaces as a scalable, distributed benefit. It supports retention across multiple geographic markets simultaneously.
Wow.
The real estate portfolio is now actively assessed based on its contribution to workforce stability.
Okay, so what does this all mean for the traditional company HQ? We've covered a lot of profound ground today, moving from the psychological dangers of the kitchen table blur to the hard economic reality of the disengagement tax. Let's pull all of this together.
Let's do it.
If we synthesize everything we've extracted from the Brandnick article, there is a very clear, undeniable, logical chain here. Employee retention is directly driven by employee engagement.
Right.
Employee engagement is heavily influenced by the daily friction of the work environment. Therefore, an employee's physical workspace is arguably an employer's most strategic, actionable lever.
And if there is one crucial piece of advice for leaders to take away from this data, it is the fundamental importance of choice.
Choice, right?
The most effective retention strategy is not to replace an old mandate with a new one.
Yeah.
You don't want to pivot from you must be at the HQ to you must be at the co-working space.
Right, because then you're just recreating the same problem.
Exactly. The magic of this model happens when co-working is offered as a highly supported option. Empowering employees with the autonomy to choose a professional workspace that supports their specific focus signals a genuine investment in their long-term well-being.
It's about building infrastructure that empowers the worker, not infrastructure that traps them. And speaking of testing out that infrastructure, the source material actually had a very relevant call-out.
Oh, right, the local offer.
Yeah, if you happen to be listening to this deep dive from the Indianapolis area, Brandnook is currently offering a free 3-day pass. It's a fantastic opportunity to actually pressure test this flexible, structured environment we've been breaking down and just see firsthand if renting that psychological boundary elevates the focus for you or your team.
Experiencing the cognitive difference between forced isolation and supported flexibility is something every professional should test for themselves. It usually makes the value of that environmental boundary immediately apparent.
I totally agree. So we kicked off this conversation by talking about that $10,000 pay cut and the realization that the old levers of employee loyalty are fundamentally broken.
Yeah, the fuel doesn't matter if the employee can't steer the car.
Exactly. But as we wrap up today's analysis, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. Something that takes the trajectory of everything we've unpacked today to its logical conclusion.
Okay. Let's hear it.
If nearly half of us are willing to actively sacrifice salary just to control where we work, and if major enterprise-level corporations are now explicitly viewing distributed, flexible co-working spaces as a superior, more profitable replacement for the traditional central office, are we rapidly approaching a future where the concept of a massive, single-company headquarters is viewed the same way we view the fax machine? Just a bulky, overly expensive relic of a bygone era.
Now that is quite the thought.
Something to think about the next time you set up your laptop. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.